It has been 9 long days since this attempted carjacking here at the airport. CBS 17 has continued to push for answers, to push for more information. This is what 15 inches of rain in just a couple of hours did to Galilee Road. There's a small creek, doesn't even have a name to it, that runs under the road. Monday night, it became a raging river. We don't know where those teens were coming from, where they were headed. This is the scene of the crash, and to my left, you can see all of this burned out debris. We have learned this house is now a total loss, and behind us, you can see why. A large tree came down, and it took down a side of the home with it. We just wanted to get your side of things. What's your side of things? You're walking away. Her family is still devastated. This is something that they have never gotten over. Every year, every anniversary, every birthday, they have tried their hardest to keep this story in the news, hoping that there might be some new development that would lead to an arrest. Investigators say it's haunted them too. She was 19 years old, a sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill with big dreams, on a scholarship, working her way through college. She wanted to become a pediatrician and help her Halawa-Saponi tribal community. All of it came to an abrupt, brutal end when Faith Hedgepeth was found beaten to death in her off-campus apartment. It happened back in 2012.
I went right back to September 12, 2012. And I couldn't function, I couldn't think.
That's what her father, Roland, said was his reaction when he got the call from investigators. They'd made an arrest.
When I cried, it was tears of joy, tears of relief.
Police charging 28-year-old Miguel Seguro Olivares with first-degree murder. So what made the difference? What cracked the case?
SBI and the Chapel Hill Police Department submitted a DNA sample to the state crime lab, and we had, of course, the DNA profile from the original crime scene, and there was a match generated.
Investigators have had DNA from the crime scene all this time. It's unclear if Seguro Olivares was finally added to the database or what may have changed. Authorities wouldn't say.
Joy, and I thought that ache of empathy for Faith and her family.
Hopefully you all, or the people that even that didn't know her, will always remember her.
And that is what her family's hope is, that Faith will forever be remembered. They admit that it might take months, even years, for them to fully realize justice, but they say they are one big step closer tonight to that happening. Live in Chapel Hill, Amy Cutler, CBS 17 News.
In an emergency, seconds count, and that's why CBS 17 is following up on staffing shortages at the Durham 911 Center. Good evening, I'm Angela Taylor.
And I'm Rod Carter. Glad you could join us tonight. Those staffing issues in Durham have led to Raleigh's center having to answer some of those calls. Tonight, only on CBS 17, we are hearing from an employee at Durham's center.
New at 11, Amy Cutler has been on this story from the beginning. She's live in Durham for us. And Amy, what did this employee have to say?
Angela, Rod, that employee is fed up. They tell me it is impacting morale and the quality of service that they provide. Now, since they still work at the center, we're not identifying them and have altered their voice. Longer shifts with no breaks, being called in on your days off. That's what a Durham 911 call center employee tells me has become the norm.
The stress levels and lack of time off, lack of time to decompress means more mistakes, more errors. You have to think very critically as a call taker and a dispatcher.
I first started reporting about staffing shortages at the Durham 911 Center back in December, when city leaders confirmed a COVID outbreak meant Raleigh would be taking some of their calls. That help continues. As of last week, Durham was supposed to have 60 employees trained to answer 911 calls. They have 26 vacancies. What do you think that might mean for residents who are calling 911 in an emergency?
Delayed time in answering the call because there's less people to take the calls, so people are waiting longer.
After calling and emailing the director of the center, Randy Beeman, I stopped by. Hi, we're with CBS 17. We're just wondering if Randy Beeman is around. With COVID restrictions still in place, I received an answer through the bell outside.
He is not available today.
Perhaps more concerning, the center is lowering its minimum staffing levels. CBS 17 obtaining internal emails that show they'll require 5 personnel or 4 personnel on shifts. Compare that to an internal email from back in April 2019. It had been 8 employees, and before that, 9 or 10.
2 people are always dispatching and not taking any calls, and so anybody that remains in excess of that would be people answering the 911 calls.
That means they could have just 2 or 3 people to answer calls on a shift. I showed those documents to Councilman Mark Anthony Middleton.
I don't think those numbers should be interpreted that a determination has been made that we don't need the staffing. That's what happens when you have a staffing situation. You have to adjust.
Then there is the issue, of course, of the 911 calls that go to Raleigh. They're supposed to ring here in the Durham Center for 30 seconds before going to the Raleigh Center. Bottom line, if you call 911 here in Durham County, have patience and stay on the line. Live in Durham, Amy Cutler, CBS 17 News. People have been stopping by the Knightdale Police Department here behind us to express their condolences and show their support. Tonight, I had the chance to speak with a Raleigh police captain who responded to that awful scene and only realized after that the officer killed was someone he knew.
He was just simply doing his job.
Officer Ryan Hayworth dedicated his life to serving. First in the Army, then the National Guard, and in the last few months, he joined the Knightdale Police Department.
He was just very excited. He told me he was down to 10 days of training.
Andy Murr is a captain with the Raleigh Police Department. He tells me Ryan was the best man at his daughter's wedding. They were close.
I'm like, Ryan, you're 23 years old now. You don't have to call me Mr. Andy anymore. And he would say, yes, Mr. Andy. He liked to joke around. He was kind of a ham.
Ryan was responding to a single vehicle crash on the side of I-540 early Sunday morning. He was with a training officer, Cody Hagler. They were on the side of the road with their lights on when a driver plowed into the back of them, knocking one cruiser into another.
I saw the severity of the crash and all that was going on.
Murr was working at the time and responded. He knew an officer was critically injured, but he didn't realize it was Ryan until after, when he was picking up some of his gear off the road.
I looked down and saw a radio battery that had his name on it. It's like nothing I've ever felt.
Soon he learned Ryan had died. He knew he needed to be the one to tell his family. Ryan's father, Tim Hayworth, is a former Zebulon police chief.
They're mad at God. They question why it had to be Ryan. Yes, we do.
Troopers say alcohol was a factor in the crash. Charges against the driver, Diedrich Privet, are pending. All 3 others involved, including Officer Hagler, remain in the hospital. Now, the town is planning a candlelight vigil for Officer Hayworth. That will be held Wednesday at 6 o'clock over at Knightdale Station Park. We have more information on our website and app. Live in Knightdale, Amy Cutler, CBS 17 News. Those new roommates are adjusting. It's, of course, a very big change. They're used to having their own space. Still, they're making it work.
Just sit here all day and edit vocals. In my heart, I know I'll be okay.
Over the last 16 years, Tremaine Williams has worked hard, living in L.A., building a successful career in the music industry.
I've worked with Jill Scott, 50 Cent, Janet Jackson, Shaka Khan, everybody.
After 10 years as a producer, he received an offer he couldn't pass up, touring with Mariah Carey.
I was like, you're going to pay me to see the world? Absolutely. I'll do it. And I always kept my studio stuff on the side just in case.
That side hustle became especially important in March when Williams learned his job stage managing would be coming to an end for who knows how long, another casualty of COVID-19.
We were in Las Vegas finishing up Mariah's residency, and we got the word that, like, in the next week or two, everything just shut down.
So you moved back in with your mom.
Oh, that sounds terrible. Yeah.
What's that been like?
It's an adjustment.
Fortunately, his new roommate doesn't seem to mind his strange hours and all the noise, or the fact that his studio is her dining room table.
This is now my world-class workspace where we get records done.
And he tells me people have been calling, even a couple while we were there.
The artist can't afford to pay you what they were going to pay you, or they just can't afford to pay you because they're trying to figure out how to make it work.
Williams charging up to 40% less. He calls it the COVID discount. While he says he's still adjusting to this new life, being back in Raleigh hasn't been too bad.
It's growing on me, definitely.
Now, Williams is having a house built here, complete with his own music studio. It was supposed to be done this month, but that work has been pushed back to next month. So that just means more bonding time, right? Live in Raleigh, Amy Cutler, CBS 17 News.